welcome to the inaugural episode of the Ludic Loungecast, an epic podcast about everything great. I am one of your hosts, John Soros, and joining me, as will be forever and ever because you're my hetero life mate.
Fair enough. Hello, my name is Antonicus Maximus. You can just call me Anthony, though. That's what John calls me.
All the time, sir. So, in case you're new to the Ludic Lounge and the Ludic Loungecast, we are an epic blog podcast about everything great. We write about a various amount of topics, which, you know, we're working on content all the time, you know, considering pandemics.
Yeah, pandemics considering, and also considering that we have day jobs that require, well, as for me, it's a night job right now, but it's the same thing. We are very, very busy men with very, very busy lives, which is why we post things when we can post things. So if you've been waiting for a little while, we apologize. But again, this is nonprofit, just us having a ball with this. So,
I mean, all of this started just, you know, as a way to kind of just give us, you know, more time to connect with each other as friends. And, you know, the blog itself is a creative exercise for all involved, just to kind of, you know, do something for the public and for ourselves to just have a little fun and talk about cool stuff and, you know, connect with people who have like-minded interests. So, you know, the
absolutely
point of this podcast as well is also to just give a little bit more regular content and, you know, give us something to focus on in light of all of these troubled times that we find ourselves in.
Yep. And as John just so eloquently stated, within the blog itself, if you've already been there, we thank you. If you haven't yet, check it out. You can just follow us on Facebook, which I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you found us via our Facebook or social media pages. We'll have some more detailed for you new viewers out there. But within the blog itself, there's different subsections regarding many different topics. We have music, we have TV, movies, comics, regular just novels and reading. There's even a little mental health corner where we kind of just promote various mental health topics just to bring more awareness, just to bring, you know, a little bit, shine a light on some darker issues, just to let those people out there know that may be suffering from some things we talk about, that you're not alone.
And please reach out to, you know, hotlines or your local mental health professional should you need any kind of treatment or assistance or just want to talk. Because in my experience, they're always happy to hear you.
Absolutely.
So, and Anthony, what are we talking about on this wonderful inaugural episode?
Well, John, I'm glad you asked.
Can I just bust into like Casey Kasem?
Yeah, a little bit.
Coming in at number 5.
At number 5. That's kind of an inside joke for our viewers watching us. John and I recorded something many moons ago where it was Super Rockin's Countdown. We would do like a subject and give like a top 5 of a plethora of subjects.
It was Rojo Loco's Super Rockin' Top 5.
Yes.
And we recorded it with your brother at your parents' house, and I swear to God, I just couldn't shut up, huh?
No, yeah, you took that podcast and you made it your own, which I was very, very appreciative of, because I was like, yeah, I freaking like this one thing. You know what? I'm going to say it right now. We may say some things that are not safe for work. Parental advisory commence. I tend to curse because I just, all the fucking time. I just feel like it puts a great emphasis on words, statements, ideas, phrases. That and my vocabulary is shitty. So cheers to that.
Yeah. What happens when you get raised by a Roman sailor? I mean, you are Antonicus Maximus, so.
The name's Maximus, Antonicus Maximus. So, John, what we're talking about today is essentially just keeping it light, keeping it brief. We're going to be talking about, John and I are both very avid gamers, and by avid gamers, we're not talking Fortnite, Call of Duty, those kinds of avid gamers. We're more so single player. Not to bash
exactly.
Not to bash y'all out there who are. We're just it doesn't necessarily tickle our fancies.
Plus, I don't want a 13-year-old yelling at us for bashing Fortnite.
Oh, that's fair. Fair enough. But to be fair and to be honest, is if I did log into Fortnite and even give it a shot, I'd get my ass so handed to me that it would not even be funny at all.
So Fortnite confuses me. It's a season model game, right?
Yes. So it's a free. It's essentially a free platform game, but they have different seasons installed, and that's where they get you, essentially. So you sign up for this battle season or that battle season, and then you get certain perks, certain weapons. From my understanding, again, I spend literally 0% of my time playing it, but this is just from word of mouth and little minor things. Obviously, it's competitor type of game where you have a lot of people competing. It's a battle royale, so a lot of people competing. And it's one of the most viewed things on streaming platforms such as Twitch, Mixer, etc.
Mm-hmm. I remember Thanksgiving last year. I had some third cousins, and they were young. They're the target demo for Fortnite. Swear to God, all they did was just hunker down on their phones playing Fortnite, and they didn't talk to anybody.
Oof.
That's I applaud them for making a game that feels that addictive, but it's also just that's crazy. The way you and I, we're both millennials. We both grew up in the onset of handheld gaming.
Yes.
So we remember I remember the first Game Boy.
Oh, absolutely.
And just how mobile gaming at least has just evolved from being just these separate handheld devices, which are still available. I mean, the Switch is a beautiful thing.
So beautiful.
Oh my God. But
by the way, this segment is brought to you by Old Man Yells at Cloud.
Yeah. I mean, I just I wonder if I would was I like that as a kid when I had a game that I was just so
I was 100%. 100% I was.
Yeah.
One of my first Game Boy games I got was Pokemon Red, and I just spent endless, when people were, when relatives would come over, stuff like that, I would just hunker down in my room and just play Pokemon. And it was Pokemon Red, then later we got Pokemon Blue, and then it was Super Mario 2, something like that. We had a Mario game and then Wario, and make a long story short, that was pretty much my life, was just handheld gaming when I could, and then of course the Nintendo Entertainment System, bless its old retro soul.
Yeah, I never had it directly an NES. I have that retro redo one that you gave me for like Christmas or a couple of years back.
Yeah, something like that.
But it was always just it was something that somebody I knew owned by virtue of the fact that one of their parents had it.
Right.
But my first Game Boy games, they were shitty, really shitty, ports. One was a port. It was do you remember Batman Vengeance?
Batman Vengeance, yes.
Yeah, I had the Game Boy Advanced version of that.
And
I know, I never played the console version, but I had that one. I could never beat it. And I also had this impossible, at least in my memory, impossible to figure out how to beat Bruce Lee martial arts game.
Oh, I remember this. Yes.
So I'm glad it's not just me who remembers that. And I imagine a lot of people remember that, but it was always fun to play. But it was just I never knew exactly what I was doing, because it was just I'm punching these guys and, there's Bruce Lee noises and that's about it.
And that's all you needed as a child, besides the fact that I remember a similar game for the Nintendo Entertainment System was it was literally just called Kung Fu. And that was the beauty of these retro systems. Their games would just be called Tennis or Kung Fu, which was fantastic. And it was very similar. It's just you walk from stage to stage just hearing karate noises and kung fu noises and punching and or kicking, and then just getting wrecked because as a 9-year-old or 8-year-old or even younger trying to play these games.
Yeah.
It was a little rough, rough and tumble.
All kinds of rough and tumble. You turned into Keanu for a second.
A little bit. Just a little bit.
Whoa, it's a little rough and tumble.
Whoa. Rough and tumble. Can we be doing that? Like, do people understand that side of Keanu anymore? Or is it all just like John Wick in current day? Because essentially he's like a fan favorite now.
Yeah. I mean, The Matrix really kind of broke that, I think. And less so like from like the stories I hear about people watching the trailer, because it's just like you hear Keanu go, whoa, and you just immediately think Bill and Ted, and then you see the movie in its entirety, and that's like I imagine like anybody seeing The Matrix for the first time on the big screen, that was probably a transcendent moment in moviedom.
I would argue that to a point, because you are correct to a point, but however, like you said, you still have those moments where he's like, whoa, I know Kung Fu. And you're like, there's my Point Break Keanu.
I think that he's still funny. It's funny that you mentioned Keanu, because I was listening to a podcast where a comic book writer was talking about, Keanu wanted to meet me for a project, and he was telling the story about what Keanu was like, and he's just like this really chill dude who, I don't think he's essentially, he's not. I don't think he's like Ted all the time, but I think he's just very relaxed and very certain about himself and his life. And
well, that's fair. I kind of always get those vibes. We talk about famous people who you never want to meet. Yeah. And one of the sayings is like, you never want to meet your hero, just because once you actually humanize them, they don't nearly compare to the pedestal you put them on. But I feel like Keanu is one of those guys who would just be chill and would match that pillar that people put him on. But again, I still feel like that's still within like from the year like 2010 on is now, because again, The Matrix is what, 98, 99? 99, right. Yeah. So again, if you're talking, that's what, 20 years ago at this point? So again, that's a huge span of people. You spoke of millennials earlier, but now you have like Gen Z and all of these other people that just maybe know him from like the John Wick stuff, internet memes, etc. So I don't think a lot of people know the Bill and Ted Keanu, minus the third installment of that movie series that's going to be coming out within the next few years, I imagine.
That's going to be interesting, because that's going to make a lot of people go back if they haven't gone back already, and they're going to see a whole different little baby-faced Keanu Reeves. It's like, this is what everyone has been making fun of for close to 30-something years.
Well, he's also been, like you said, you mentioned the comic book podcast you're talking about. He's also been in talks on and off again for to be in certain movies, and I can't remember which one, but I read something somewhere that he's expected to be a part of one of the upcoming Marvel films.
He was rumored for the Jude Law part in Captain Marvel.
That makes sense.
Like there was a couple rumors that I heard that he was in serious contention for Yon-Rogg that was played by Jude Law, and I think he held out because he wants to. I don't think he wants to be a one-off villain, and I don't think Jude Law is going to be a one-off. I think he's probably going to show up again. Because Marvel's playing the long, they play long games with these things. So,
they also play end games.
Yeah, that too. Like the one thing I know he keeps saying, he wants to play Wolverine.
That would be interesting.
And I think that a lot of the public opinion about the X-Men is very off base to what the source material is, because those movies have been the Fox movies, at least, have been a part of popular culture for 20 years now, because and you can still say they're still active because New Mutants still hasn't come out.
Yeah, fair.
And it's still part of that line of Marvel movies.
It might even been longer than 20 years, because again, speaking to like early 90s or mid 90s, the X-Men TV show on like your Fox Saturday mornings or whatever have you. So again, it's probably even pushing more than 20 years.
Yeah. So I think that we're whatever Marvel decides to do, because I think there were some quote unquote controversial comics by one of the Marvel Studios producers. I believe her name is Victoria Alonso. She was saying the X-Men, the name X-Men is a little bit outdated because it's not all men. It's all kinds of people, which is the metaphor that mutants are. So it's just like maybe they won't even be called that, which is totally fair. I mean, you said it yourself. It's fair and it's just the nature of the way that franchise is. It's just the characters are just so variable and completely diverse because that's what the metaphor is.
Well, going back to that, so I agree that we live in a different time now, and we should live in a different time now, and all exclusive, people becoming more inclusive and understanding with all of that fun stuff. But the only thing that leads me to believe that they won't be changing or rebranding that anytime soon is money, right? First of all, I mean, they're trying to brand the name X-Men by itself, or will bring if you just make it X-Men, whatever, X-Men the series, X-Men the whatever, it's going to bring 80% of people just oh yeah, X-Men, I recognize the name recognition. They're going to come and sit in your chairs and pay top dollar. That's
what I don't get about all the people who were giving that producer so much shit. It's just she's just spitballing. The name recognition alone and the trademarking they get from the word X-Men is invaluable. There's no way it's never going to disappear. It's a fair question to ask, but it's just the reality of business is completely going to undercut it. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's an important conversation, and I'm glad we're having it.
Exactly. Speaking of conversations, to bring it back around, because our freaking ADHD brains just go all over.
Speaking of brains, for those of you who don't know, John is just a wizard of just everything to do with the entertainment industry and or comics and or any sort of reading. And he just likes to have me on to play, the invaluable sidekick, if you will, to just kind of tickle his beautiful brain at times.
You're Aquaman?
I'm Aquaman? Yeah, I'm totally Aquaman out of this pair.
You're just my man. Yeah.
And not beautiful Aquaman, Jason Momoa. I'm talking Justice League. Yeah, I'm talking blonde hair, shitty outfit, calling, jellyfish to come so I can sit on them and ride them. Sounds like my Friday night.
You think it's a shitty superpower, but it's pretty clever. I mean, he's always constantly asking for help. I mean, that's. I'm being serious. It's just he's able to ask for help. How many people are able to say, "No, I'm over my head. Please help me."
That's fair, and we do kind of shit on him for that fact. But
yeah,
it takes a very strong person to know their capabilities and know their limits and know when they need a helping hand.
Yeah, it's just like you said, it's a different time. So I think so much of the bashing on that character is just because he's dumb. He talks to fish. He's not Superman.
But I feel like there's a whole 180 on that now with Jason Momoa and just how beautiful and buff that dude is. So now it's not okay, so we're gonna stop talking shit about Aquaman now.
I mean, fair. That's one of the things Zack Snyder gave us is, half full of a can of bullshit is his.
Oh, God. I'm not even going to get into Snyder. I haven't had enough to drink to talk about Snyder yet.
Me neither. And that's a whole crowd of people we don't want to attract right now.
Fair enough. So, speaking of people we want to attract.
Hey-o.
Segue. Right now I am playing and attracting a companion in Divinity 2, the beautiful CRPG, or isometric RPG, whatever they're calling it nowadays, that got ported to the Nintendo Switch. It was essentially a game of the year a couple years ago, or maybe 1 year ago on the PC. Got ported to major consoles and most recently got ported to the Switch as early as maybe a few months back. Beautiful game. I'm enjoying a lot of the storytelling elements. I feel as though I'm an idiot savant when it comes to that. And by idiot spot, I mean like I just stumble into things not knowing, like I'm supposed to go to quest giver A, get a certain thing to go to site B, but I end up just walking into site B because I'm just kind of exploring and walking around with my party members.
So give us a quick info dump about what Divinity is.
Oh, info dump. Okay.
Yeah, we're just like a small summary, because like you and I have talked about it, and I know it's like a turn-based fantasy RPG.
Yes.
But I don't really know much.
It's hard to make it a quick summary because it is so dense in lore. Mm-hmm. But if I were to just give a blurb about it, which I'm probably going to butcher, essentially you play either you can play as one of pre-rendered characters with various and beautiful and rich stories, or you can have them as companion members and create your own character, which is what I chose to do. And essentially, you wake up on this ship with a slave collar around your neck that essentially is magically infused to mute what's called source power. Yeah. And what source power is essentially power that you receive from one of, I think it's like 7 or 8 gods, and each race of character has a different god looking out for them. So the humans have a certain god, elves have a certain god, dwarves have a certain god, lizards have a certain god, et cetera, et cetera. So essentially, after you are on this boat, it wrecks, you land up on this prison island, essentially, and from there, you're just trying to escape, trying to get the source color off. But you get saved as your ship gets shipwrecked by a god, essentially saying, "You're my chosen one." Okay. You are the one that's going to exceed to become what's called the divinity, the divine, which it's a little hazy and very lore dump, but essentially it's you're the one to save the world, if you will. Just kind of put in a basic ends. But what you come to find out is you're not the only one who was touched by a god and told that. There is a various amount of people who have been touched by all these gods to say, nope, you're going to be the chosen one. So it's essentially like a race against time to reach divinehood, to reach this divinity. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a cool little niche to everything. That you don't have the stereotypical "you are the chosen one, go do things." It's like, no, you could be, but you also have all of these other people, including your companions that you recruit, who are what's called God woken, so God's chosen, if you will, to ascend. And then wackiness ensues, essentially. So it's a turn-based. Wow, let's try that again. Turn-based RPG, meaning depending on it's structured a lot with like D&D stereotypes, where you have your fighter class, your mage class, your huntsman class, plethora of different combinations of what you can fight and how you can fight as. In this run, I chose to be what's called like a black mage, and that essentially comes from just like an all attack based mage. White mage is typically and stereotypically your healer class, whereas your black mage is more so of your attack mage. Having a lot of fun with that. I'm put a lot of powers into like summoning, which means I can conjure like different aliens or different demons to fight for me, which has really interesting skills and stuff like that. But to make a long story short, I'm pretty close to the end. I feel like maybe within the next couple of weeks I'll be done. I don't want to spoil anything away, but it's definitely worth your time. I got it for the Switch because I like the portability of the Switch, so I can just pick it up and, if I'm not playing it in dock mode, just pick it up and go wherever I go and play it. But it's definitely worth picking up, either if you're a PC gamer or, Xbox, PS4, whatever have you. It's definitely worth your time.
Yeah, I know you've been itching on me to pick that up, so that's next to do on my
absolutely. Absolutely. So, and when I'm not playing that right now, I'm playing MLB The Show 20. For those who don't know, that's like the yearly baseball game that comes out once a year, just like Madden, FIFA, NBA 2K, etc. I'm having a really good time with it. I really like some of the changes they made from last year's edition. I love when there's little minor tweaks that really make a huge emphasis that maybe it hasn't been picked up on. For example, that on this year's installment, if you exactly just hit the ball with your bat in the right way, it just makes like this echoing, just like crack noise. like it would be if you're sitting in the stadium, which just feels so good when you smack like an out-of-the-park home run. So that's just one of the little minor tweaks that I love about it. Great online play. I haven't done much as far as competitive online play, but I've done some of the certain modes that you can do that's single-based for your creative team. The franchise mode I'm loving. What they added as far as franchises, you can actually relocate current MLB ball clubs and actually move them to wherever you want and actually change the logo, change every little detail about that. So I have another franchise playthrough that I'm doing with that, which I'm having the ball with, which is a lot of fun.
Now, do you do every year with the sports games? Do you go year by year, or do you
typically, that's how I've been doing it. Baseball. So one of the things I love about video games, which I can go on a tangent about just in general, is that how you can learn from video games. Mm-hmm. And that's how I've learned a lot about my love for sports and different sports. So for the longest time, I haven't picked up any baseball, MLB The Show games at all. But a couple of years back, I actually picked it up, and it's helping me learn the game, which has given me an appreciation for the actual sport by itself. But on a yearly basis, I was getting Madden, I was getting NBA 2K every year. Since about like 2010, 2011, Madden since all the way back to 2004. But basketball, I did the same thing that I'm doing with baseball, where I, wanted to learn more about the sport. I was living in the Bay Area of California at the time, so on the radio was a lot of things talking about the Golden State Warriors. So I wanted to understand basketball a little better. So I picked up NBA 2K10 or 2K11 and started learning about basketball from there, then grew to love the sport and love the video game franchise. When it comes down to Madden, as of right now, I'm kind of been turned off on it. I don't think I'll pick up the new edition unless something spectacular happens, because when it comes to the Madden franchises and EA, what they've been doing, it's just I feel like a lot of cut and copy and paste.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is that one of my cousins in Portugal, he played a lot of. I imagine he still plays a lot of FIFA. And he doesn't do it year by year. He goes according to his favorite team and whether they win the championship that year or not.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so and they're fairly active, so they do get. It's not like he's going like 10 years without buying a game. It's like every couple years. So and the reason he did that is just because he was more interested in the game progressing, and there was more progression when he waited.
Yeah. Well, with FIFA in itself, John, that you brought it up, a lot of times what I've heard from I'm not a big FIFA person. That's my next sport I need to get into. I think I own a FIFA game on my Xbox right now because eventually I do want to get into the sport of soccer because it is, again, internationally one of the most popular sports.
And the sport of our people.
Yeah, and the sport of the Portuguese people.
Yeah. The hairy bastards that we are.
True. Very true. With FIFA, what I've heard a lot of people is they go every other year. Right. And I thought that's what you're going to go into just because – FIFA's actually done really well as far as inventing certain, from what I've heard, again, not first-hand experience, certain intricacies, certain gameplay tweaks here and there. But a lot of times people just go every other year with that because they're just, if you go from just one year to the other year, a lot of things will feel copy and pasted, like Madden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're just in the sports mode game and Divinity. Anything else you're playing? Because that's the first topic of the day, folks, is what we're playing.
Yeah, this is only the first topic. Mind you, I think we have like 3 or 4, but the thing you'll soon know about John and I is we typically are very long-winded, and we just kind of go off on side tangents that sometimes might not make sense, but we always land the plane.
Yeah, we always land the plane, and to be honest, this is just how we talk in general. This is if you're having a drink with us at like some party or at some bar, this is what it would typically end up being like, where it is just the two of us pontificating to each other and just trying to make each other laugh, which, yeah, we do all right. We land that plane.
We always come back around at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
I try not to juggle more than 2 to 3 games at a time.
Yeah.
Especially with deeper games like Divinity 2, where it's easy to pick up and easy to get going, but it's so like lore based and so like, okay, what am I doing in this story? Mm-hmm. that at times it's like if I don't play it for 7 months, I might kind of like, what the hell am I doing here? Might get a little confused. Although they try to update you as far as like the journal goes. I was balancing those two games, and then I was actually into Dragon Age 2. Completed that, though, right before I was seriously gotten into Divinity and MLB The Show. Finished it, great game, honestly. A lot of people kind of bashed Dragon Age 2, and for certain things, it's fair. There is a lot of, like, the same dungeon use, stuff like that. But I really enjoyed the character. I really enjoyed what they did with relationships. That'll be for a different time, of course. We can go into our love for BioWare and love for all things BioWare related.
That's a whole other episode for another day.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so now I'm just down to those two right now.
Yeah.
So John, you heard from me, the audience heard from me, and my pontificating. What are you playing? What are you into? Why are you into them? And how are you spending your time during this quarantine?
Well, gaming-wise, my year has been a little bit interesting. I revisited The Witcher 3 beginning of this year, and I hadn't played that since the DLC packages came out for those. So I'd only played the base game, and I was very impressed with it, but I wasn't it was just something to do, and it was fun to play and just explore that world, but I didn't completely have an understanding on the lore of it. And the reason I jumped back to it was that Witcher TV show.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people, like me, for example, I jumped into Witcher 3 as well as soon as that show dropped on Netflix.
And the other thing I was doing at the time was I was listening to the collections of those Witcher short stories, which the first season takes a lot of inspiration from. So between the show and the books, I had a very solid understanding as to where Geralt was coming from, what had happened to Ciri. Even though I haven't gotten far enough in the book series to understand exactly what her ending was in the book series versus where she is in the game.
Right. Yeah. And again, like I said, I jumped into around the same time you jumped back into it. And just like a lot of people jumped back into it, I myself jumped back into it. But for me, it's a beautiful game. Again, that game came out. A lot of people forget that game came out more than a year ago. This is talking like 2, 3, 4.
2015, I think.
2015, right. So that's about 5 years ago. And it's still a beautiful game. I played it for PlayStation. John was playing it for his PlayStation 4 as well. And it's a beautiful game. Graphics still hold up. For me, it's one of those, like, there was just so much shit to do. It was so dense that I'm just like, I love the fact that each side story felt unique and felt like the creators took time on it. And I appreciated the holy hell out of it. But for me, it was just like, it got to that same kind of like, okay, so now I have 75 side quests I have to do. And it just got to the point I'm like, okay, it's just not fun for me anymore. And that's when I jumped into different video games. And again, then MLB The Show came out, and I was kind of like, okay, this is how I'm spending my time.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of those criticisms. Graphically, I think where it is strongest is in the environments. I think that is a world simulator like no other that I can think of at the moment. I think the character models and the dialogue itself, audio-wise, is fine. I think the character models haven't, they've aged a little bit poorly. They're still top of the line, but in comparison to things that came down the line later, like say, Spider-Man or God of War,
right?
Where the character acting is very, very important there. That Witcher really pales. It also, I feel like the main story also gets overshadowed by a lot of the side quests and the later DLC. or particularly the second DLC, which Blood and Wine. That was the name of it, I think.
Pretty sure you're right.
It's like Blood and Wine gets very, very political and draws a lot on the lore of the book series. And that's something that I think the main story doesn't have. Let me rephrase. Blood and Wine has the one thing that the main story doesn't do very well, which is momentum. The main story, the momentum there is Geralt needs to find Ciri.
Right.
The problem with the momentum is that it gets bogged down by everything else you can do in the game.
Oh, that is 100% right. And that was one of the things that I lost interest in because I was doing so many of these side quests where it was like, oh shit, what was I doing? What's the main thread? Oh yeah, I gotta find Ciri. And they make it seem like it's so imminent and you have to do it so like right now because she's in danger. But then they drove on 75 side quests and get you distracted with pretty shiny armor upgrades and sword upgrades.
Yeah, you do. You get stuck with dealing with finding all this kind of Witcher armor and then doing the Witcher job, which is just like, considering what you know about Geralt and you know about his connection to Ciri and the fact that they are tied together by destiny and he's essentially a surrogate father, you would think that...
Or potential lover, because I think she's a romance option in Witcher 3.
No, actually, no. She is always treated like a daughter.
Okay. I thought in some warped way she was a romance option.
I mean, if you believe like some people on the internet who make weird videos and stuff, which I don't want to see,
fair enough.
The case.
Yeah, fair enough. We don't need Witcher incest.
Hell no. But I mean, the other problem that comes immediately to mind is that there's a dissonance between what the story is asking Geralt to do and what you can do, just because of this is a game and you're supposed to exist in this world and do whatever you want. But from a story sense, that is a little bit rough to me because it's just like, well, any momentum you had is out the door.
Right.
Like to compare it to something like God of War or Spider-Man, which are like the redefining games for open world for me at least.
Yeah, because, I think you and a lot of other people.
Well, and I think that because both of those games build on what you can do very, very naturally. Like with Spider-Man, everything kind of just you don't get bombarded with all the collectibles at once and all the missions you can do at once. They kind of just you do a thing and then naturally the story will tell you, oh, here's a thing you can do, and that's the new option.
Right.
But and same with God of War, where you have the immediacy of you have to honor the character, the last wishes of Kratos' wife and Atreus' mother, but you have all of this space in between, events that they have to deal with and a lot of travel time, where deviating from the path makes a little bit more narrative sense because you're as Kratos, you're still training the kid.
Right.
They come up with the excuse of, well, this will be good experience for you, and we could use the equipment.
Right. No, I mean, my thing with God of War, John, we've talked about this on the private side. It's just, I loved everything it was doing and trying to do. I love that it felt like just one flowing shot. It just felt like one solid, like it wasn't like abrupt cutscenes, abrupt anything. It was just fluid. It was flowing, beautiful motion until you get to a fucking puzzle. And things with me, my dear loyal listeners, is I hate puzzles.
Yeah.
In games that shouldn't have puzzles, in my opinion. Like certain games will have like certain things within the gameplay where like, okay, this is like a little minor puzzle, but it's not going to take me 3 hours to get. It's a little minor thing, and then it's not going to really feel like halting progression. But with God of War, you can't get to certain sections without doing puzzles to open the new fucking portal or whatever. And for the most part, I don't want to sit here and think about that I have to get this enchanted axe to hit this one thing at this certain time and then withdraw it and then have Atreus shoot an arrow at a target. You know what I mean? That's a little too much for me. So yes, I'm a simple man who enjoys simple things.
Usually, mostly throwing an axe into somebody's face. I get it.
Absolutely. Like for me, God of War should be a great narrative with great action adventure, but more action than adventure. But again, that's my preference. Obviously, I am nobody. I am not a critic, nor am I somebody in the industry to actually make said game.
It's never too late.
That's true.
But to overall, I would say, and I think most people would agree, is that Witcher 3 is a very positive experience, and I don't regret, putting in the time. It's just, it is a commitment of a game,
Yes,
and it is very unrelenting because it does not, you're always dealing with something that's higher difficulty than you, and it forces you to strategize. It forces you to do things to, make money smartly and, approach things with caution and understand, and you do feel repercussions in the choices that you made. Like for me, Blood and Wine really kicked me in the butt because the way it ended for me personally was not the ending I was hoping for. And it's just, it's that perfect, quote from Picard in Next Generation. You can still do everything perfectly and still lose.
Right.
That's that's not a fault. That's just life. But that's the one of the immediate things in my head that is fantastic about The Witcher is that it's unrelenting in playing, and it's unrelenting in its consequence on your actions. You will feel, the cost of making a bad decision because it will close off something to you forever.
Right.
And that has weight. That in the narrative that you're dealing with because you have the overarching narrative of I have to find Ciri.
Right.
When you start barreling down to these smaller plots, they work really well in the context of this is just Geralt going around doing Witcher shit.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, the human cost in this limited context of dealing with Witcher shit, this is a great story. In relation to the grander scheme of things, it's a little bit suspect because, Geralt clearly has a more important thing to do, which is find his fucking adoptive daughter.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, we're kind of poo-pooing at some of this stuff, but to be fair, you can run straight to just main story, do all the main story, do all those fun things. It's just like you mentioned, you're going to kind of pay for it because at some point you're going to run into level, 25, 100 bad guys when you're level 5 because all you're strictly doing is running to it. Another aspect about Witcher 3 that we haven't even touched upon, and one of my friends who was playing Witcher 3 around the same time we were, because again, the Netflix series came out, so everybody kind of jumped into it, was that they were saying it's a Gwent simulator with some story in the background. It's a card game simulator with some story in the background. And I found that super brilliant because one of the aspects, the game inside the game, if you will, is it's a card-based game called Gwent, where it's like a strategy game, a strategy card game where you're doing it. And I've never been one for card games, in games within games as far as that is, because again, I'm a simple kind of man who looks for simple kind of things in his video games. But for the most part, it was very well done, but I would just always get my ass handed to me because I was just apparently not smart enough to strategize in this game to come out ahead of everyone.
What's funny, speaking of Gwent, is that I like the console version in the game better than the version of Gwent that they pulled out to just make as a Gwent simulator.
Yes, because they did come off with that spinoff where it was just like pure Gwent. And that's one of the things I did hear is that it was such a lesser version than the console/PC inside of the Witcher 3 game.
It's like, I don't get, like, you have a popular thing. Like, everybody that I knew talked about the game, talked about how much Gwent they played. Because when you know how to play it well, that game is intoxicating.
Oh, yeah, it'll break you. Like, it breaks the game.
But, like, that means you have a perfect thing waiting for more players. And the fact that there are more people who are just like, yeah, no, this remake, it doesn't work as well as the in-game version. That's a little bit disappointing to me because it's just like, you knew what you had. Why would you just, tinker with the recipe just so when you already had it perfect the first time?
Well, I think what it was, John, honestly, I don't think, and again, I have no insight, I don't think they actually knew how Gwent was going to blow up within the game itself. I think they made the game and like, let's just add this little card game for shits and giggles. Mind you, I haven't played Witcher 1 and 2, so I don't know if that was an option to do in the previous games. But I feel like within Witcher 3, they're like, well, we're going to add this thing here, and it's going to be a fun little to-do, and we're going to add some optional storylines and optional side quests for this if people really want to invest into it. And they just, as soon as it came out and people just loved and consumed the game and blew through it, and people were hankering for something, they're like, well, we got to strike where the iron's hot. And so CD Projekt Red, the developer, was like, okay, let's just do a port where it's just literally the card game, and that should placate a lot of our fans. Because one thing I will say about CD Projekt Red is they always try to do right by their fans, by people who buy their games. Not a lot of video game companies out there can say that, but that's why a lot of people are flocking to them, and they're becoming a AAA title now and are essentially, making big blockbuster games at this point. Yeah. Whereas a few years ago, before like even Witcher 3, they were doing like B-side games essentially.
Yeah, and like even because I played the first Witcher on PC, and like it is a markedly different game than what Witcher 3 is. And it's one where it's very just like, I know you jokingly said, Witcher 3 is a card game simulator with a story attached. My recollection of that first Witcher game is that it's a goth sex simulator with a story attached to it. Because it's so I remember that game going out of its way to really it really put a focus on romancing as many women as you can, because you got these collectible cards with naked ladies on them, and they were the ladies that you slept with.
Well, John, first you piqued my interest, but now you have my curiosity.
Does this mean you have the vapors?
Oh, I do declare. I got the vapors, just you mentioning the golf romance simulator. Joking aside, however, Witcher 3 overall is a great game, and at some point I may jump back into it. I think John is done for it for a long, lengthy period of time.
Yeah, I think there is a New Game Plus, and I seriously contemplated it, but it put me. You keep all your equipment, you keep your level, but it essentially puts you back to level 1 because everything scales up to whatever level you're at, and that is essentially the new level 1.
Yeah, so if you're level 50, by the time you finish the game, you start off level 50, but now everything's level 51, 52.
So it's essentially just repeating it, and that's not necessarily a thing I wanted to do.
Right.
Especially with a game that size.
That's the thing. It's just the game that size, man. Like, you're speaking to the guy, myself personally. I played the Mass Effect trilogy. Like, I put hundreds upon hundreds of hours into that trilogy. But again, overall, each individual section was not like a 200-plus hour game in itself. So it makes it easier to jump back and play those games, whereas like Witcher 3, again, it's just such dense material that I could see after just one playthrough, like, I did everything. I think I'm good.
Yeah, it's just like I would rather just work on other games, and at that point, I had to transition into what I next did was Control, the Remedy Studios game, which is a little bit sci-fi-ish. It's the elevator pitch, I would say, is a Lovecraftian X-Files where you play Scully.
That's awesome.
That's
one hell of an elevator pitch, mind you.
I sure as hell hope so. I mean, it's an eerie game. It's one of the most difficult games I've ever played, and it is a third-person action shooter with a little bit of RPG elements. But I mean, it's hard to say anything is pure RPG anymore.
That's fair, because I feel like there's so many RPG elements. Hell, even MLB The Show that I'm playing has RPG elements. If you do Road to the Show, which is like my career mode, you have so many RPG elements. So it's hard to say that's like, yeah, pure RPG when there's so many different elements that make up an RPG in a lot of games today.
Yeah. So, but you play as a woman named Jessie who comes across this Federal Bureau of Control, and she's looking for her brother. And she this bureau has him, and there's backstory between the two, her brother Dylan and Jesse with the bureau. This is not the first time she's met the bureau.
Interesting.
But you come across it's this strange building with confusing floors, and you end up meeting this entity called the Hiss that has taken possession of a number of the FBC personnel inside the building, and you learn that the building is this giant Lovecraftian maze of endless floors and hidden secrets, and you learn more about what the Bureau does, all while because the long-term goal of the game is for Jessie to find her way to becoming the director of the Federal Bureau of Control.
And so the Federal Bureau of Control is essentially like CIA, FBI. Is that a fair comparison?
I would say more along the lines of FBI, but as if Fox Mulder dictated what the FBI did, which is go after all the weird shit.
Okay, so it's like FBI for like Area 51 shit.
Exactly. I would say you're honestly playing in like Area 51, but it's more unexplainable things than aliens.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
So and it's.
But John, the real question is it run by top men?
It's run by top women.
For those of you playing at home, I made an Indiana Jones reference, so that means you must take a drink in the Ludic Lounge drinking game. The Ludic Loungecast drinking game.
I took a drink.
There you go.
We're just gonna make it. Everyone take a drink when we make a Spielberg reference.
Oh Jesus! Or just any sort of like out of the blue. You don't know how many times I want to make a Back to the Future reference in a couple sections that since we've been recording.
No,
that's on to the second. But that's on number 2, so we haven't gotten that part yet.
No, but yeah, Control it's an interesting experience. There is no like difficulty scaling. You can't pick easy or hard from jump. It's just like it gets progressively tougher, and there's still one boss that I just cannot beat. And it's a purely optional boss, but it's just like this one little thing, even though I've beaten the game, that is just there, kind of just hanging out, waiting for me to come back to it. But it's just, I got so frustrated that I didn't want to deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
And
I've never been one for those games like Dark Soul and everything like that, where it's just like, yeah, it's so goddamn hard, so you got to get good, son. And I don't like games like that, honestly.
Yeah. Control is very akin to that. It's not. Yeah, it's not like. I don't know how to say it. Honestly, you know what? I think you got a point, because the only game I can compare it to off the top of my head is Jedi Fallen Order, which is also Star Wars doing a Dark Soul impression.
Yeah, essentially. That's a fair comparison.
And Control has a similar setup like that, where it's just like, if you die, you get jumped back to, either a checkpoint or more often a save point. Similar to, I've never played Dark Souls, but I've seen people do it. So I know that, campfires are, that save spot, and that's where you jump back to.
Now hold on to your britches, kids, because Grandpappy Matthias here is going to talk to you all about this fucking bullshit of, if you die, you have to go back hours in the game. We're living in 2020, folks. We should be able to save a game at any point, right before boss fight, right before whatever, and not have to suffer. Again, speaking of Jedi Fallen Order, one of the reasons I was into it, couldn't beat it, couldn't go through it, is just because I don't have a lot of time to sit there and spend 3 hours in a game. So at many times with these campfire bullshit things, meditation points, where they're like, you save at way back here, but you're already progressing all these bullshit puzzles and everything, but you have to shut off your console and go because you got to go to work because you're a grown-ass fucking adult. To the point where you jump back in, you're now hours and hours behind because you can't just save where you're at right at the moment, and that's fucking bullshit. And this has been sponsored by Old Man Yells at Cloud.
Coming soon to you at retail store.
I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry.
No.
I had to put my hot take out there.
Honestly, it's certainly a take. I'm 50-50. I don't like it sometimes, but only when it's just like, I did a lot of stuff and now I have to go back because I screwed up or I just wasn't good enough in that moment. And it's just
First of all, John, you're not 50-50, you're 100%, and you make up way more of the fact of my heart than is probably legally allowed in this state.
Now you're just sweet talking.
Absolutely. So, John, one game I turned you on to after Control was Persona 5. And the reason I turned you on... Oh, not yet?
No, Outer Worlds first, sir.
My apologies. Outer Worlds I did. Now, I enjoyed... So, give you a short little recap here is I bought Outer Worlds essentially when it dropped because it was coming from Obsidian, which did Knights of the Old Republic 2, amongst other things. Fallout New Vegas as well. Those two games I enjoyed, make up a lot of my childhood. They're
a Bethesda BioWare clone that made a lot of games similar to those that Anthony and I both really have a strong fondness for because, we played them in our formative years, both, as young lads in high school and somewhat younger, older but younger lads in college.
Exactly. So I picked it up because I saw that it was going to be a sci-fi RPG, which I'm always on board for the most part, but made by Obsidian, which means that it's going to have some strong narrative elements, character development, etc. Picked it up, enjoyed the hell of it, really enjoyed it. A lot of people kind of bashed on it because it was like, it wasn't that long. It was maybe like 40 hours of a gameplay, 50 hours maybe. Not super long by today's standards of, like, say, Witcher 3, which is like 150 plus, but I really enjoyed it. I won't give an elevator pitch because that'll be for another day, and we're already kind of digressing on much, but essentially I liked a lot of the satire within it. I liked a lot of the jokes they made. It has one of my favorite side characters in all of the games I've played ever, essentially in Pavarotti, whose name I can never pronounce.
And I mean, the short version is that it's a satirical space adventure where the corporations have been in charge of the humanity since like the 1900s and going beyond into the far future. But I got turned on to the game by Anthony, and like I mentioned, it's within the wheelhouse of games that we typically played.
Yes.
And Anthony has given it a tremendously glowing review. I'm still in the midst of the game, and at least in the early stages, I feel a little mixed, because while I do appreciate the satire, the Fallout nature of the game and just the kind of the silence of it, I think, and I say that because I've gotten so used to the protagonist being more vocal. Like I was expecting, like a voice rolled protagonist, and now it's just like I'm reading text again, which is not bad, but it's just, I think,
again, when you're so used to like Mass Effect trilogy, Inquisition, Dragon Age 2, BioWare themed, where it's now like essentially everything is narrative based, for better or for worse. It's all narrative based. So when you're used to that for so many years, going back to a text based protagonist is off putting. Example is I recently replayed Dragon Age Origins because I'm trying to go through the trilogy, and that's all text based, and that was a little off putting for me. It's meant to be so that you're literally implementing yourself into the game, where you don't have to worry about like, okay, so now I know this is going to be me, but it's not really me because it's voiced by another person.
Right. Which I'm here for it. And the next game we're going to talk about after Outer Worlds is within that ballpark as well. But for whatever reason, I'm just not as enamored with Outer Worlds as I thought I was going to be. I haven't touched it in a minute for various reasons. I'm also doing a little bit less gaming lately. I think Control and Witcher both were a bit lengthy, and I don't know. We're old men.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think that's the key thing is that even though we're still moderately young by most standards, I don't think we have the patience or the stamina to do a lot of big games like that. So,
well, and to one of the points you just made, John, and again, I still give the game Outer Worlds glowing review, but one of the points is, when you mentioned like it's in silence, like sitting in silence, like yes, you have a silent protagonist, but also the world itself. While there's side characters, NPCs out there, it's still a lot of time you're just walking in vast wilderness kind of a thing. And the kind of silence by itself speaks volumes. I wish there was more banter between, side characters, banter between you and these characters, which there is in the game. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of that, and it's great. But a lot of the times it's just I wish there was more just like Fallout wackiness where, NPCs are fighting each other and talking crazy. So, I mean, I understand your criticisms, and it's fair. It's very fair. Plus, it's an easy game to break, especially if you put a lot of points into persuasion, charisma, etc.
Yeah.
The game essentially, like, that's what I did in my role play, because that's how I play a lot of those games. And again, I essentially I broke the game to where I never really had to do much combat. And when I did do combat, I was such a high level that I just annihilated everybody at that point.
Well, you prefer to play as a charmer because you're a charmer.
Oh, absolutely. I love sweet talking, smooth talking. If I can silver tongue my way through a lot of life, I would.
That's what she said. Oh, but I mean, I plan to jump back into it. I want to give it more of a fair shake before I make a kind of decision against going, saying this isn't worth my time versus, it is worth my time.
Yeah.
Like I only went past the first world. So
right.
I feel like it's unfair to judge it based on just what is essentially a tutorial world.
Yeah.
But like, I think the other part is that I'm so used to a lot more characters being fleshed out in your party, at least. And it's just like right now, I haven't gotten to that point that you're describing, at least about Pavarotti or whomever else is in the ship.
Yeah.
Which is also unfair because I mean, like Mass Effect, which is like the golden example of this has character development. It takes a spell for some of those characters to get to the point where everybody's just like, oh, I love this guy. Like I think Garrus I think gets most of his development in 3. And in 2,
in 2, 2 to 3, that's big. Because Mass Effect 1, like once you reach the like everything with his dialogue, like that's it. Like you can only go so far with this character.
But even in 2, he's so much of a more angrier version of that guy from Mass Effect 1, of that Garrus from 1. That's my stance. I mean, it's a little bit. I think you could shift the lens.
He's Space Batman, John. He's Space Batman in 2. He's Space Batman. I won't have you speak ill of him any further.
That is fair, though not completely. But the other game. Speaking of character development, God, we're good at segues, aren't we?
Segway.
Anthony also convinced me to pick up Persona 5, so I picked up Persona 5 Royal. I started that about a little bit earlier in the month, and so far, I haven't. That game is like 120 plus hours, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's super dense. That's why, because I played it. So I first heard of it last year myself, around the summertime. Maybe it was sometime, maybe it was earlier, but I ended up picking it up, the regular vanilla edition, around the same time I picked up Red Dead Redemption 2, which is also a super intense game, a super lengthy, intense game. So it was one of those, like, I had to choose, because, I was doing my schooling thing. I was doing a lot of other spinning plates in my personal life. So I had to choose between one of the lengthier ones, and I chose Red Dead 2 and put Persona on the back burner because, again, just like I was talking about Witcher 3, it's so dense, and there's so much to do in that game. It's almost overwhelming at times.
And the benefit of Persona 5, at least, and I'm not completely familiar. I've heard of the series. I heard about the the ramp up to 5. I knew like everyone was really looking forward to 5 coming out after the other 4. And I know the benefit of the game is that it's a turn-based style RPG, Japanese RPG, and it's essentially a school simulator in a way too.
Right.
But I appreciate that because the day structure kind of helps with the ability to jump in and out, as far as I'm concerned. Because I go a couple days before I do a giant spiel for like an in-game month or an in-game week in Persona. And that helps because it's just like there's a lot to juggle, and that's the key thing for me that I'm having a little bit of struggle with, is that there's so much to do, to up your character's personality traits and equipment and that's not counting the interpersonal stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The relationship building and all that stuff.
Which is the heart of the game. I mean, that's why everybody plays it, and that's why everybody is so, I think, fixated with it, is that you can develop these very personal relationships with the characters in your party. And so far, I only have, not counting the player character, I have, those initial 3 that the game just gives you.
Right.
And like this, part of it is, me not having done the research yet, because I didn't feel like I could yet, mostly in particular because I wanted to focus on just building the characters that I had. I wasn't really necessarily looking for anybody else. I lost my train of thought.
That's fair enough. So essentially, it's a very dense game to where So you have to essentially complete a dungeon. Let's just call it a dungeon without to not make spoilers out there, since Persona 5 Royal just came out, which is like an updated version with added gameplay, added ease of life, update, stuff like that.
It's the Game of the Year edition, right?
Yeah, essentially, let's call it a Game of the Year edition, because that's what it is. But essentially, it's a dense game with all of these other mechanics into it, and it's really built for, like, you have, let's say, an in-game month to do X amount of things before you have to seriously complete this dungeon, or you can complete the dungeon first and then have the rest of this month to do whatever the hell you want to do. And in that time, you can do such things as building up your own stat points as far as, like, different things. Or you can spend it building up interpersonal relationships with your comrades. And again, it's really up to you how you choose that time. And it's essentially built to where you can do multiple gameplays of it, because there's so many different avenues to explore. But again, to John's point, this is like a 150-plus hour game, it feels like. And it's just like, Jesus, do I really want to spend a second round doing all this?
And what I think gets me is, and I think this is based off of playing American RPGs, where it feels like you can really complete everything if you try hard enough and putting in enough time. I think with what I'm having issue with in Persona is that I want to be able to foster all these relationships with these people and do everything, but I just don't know if the game's going to give me the time to do that, and that's just by the way it's built. And it's also the frustration of I'm not given enough when I interact with these characters to know if I should keep pursuing, if I shouldn't keep pursuing. Should I be putting more time into developing, the protagonist character, that kind of stuff. And maybe it was also part because I've only gotten past that initial dungeon,
right?
And I'm a little bit beyond that. I'm towards like I'm trying to figure out what to call it without spoiling it.
Right.
But essentially, the second dungeon is finally available to me, and it's a lot broader than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
So it's just like, okay, well, now I have this in between the really big, this smaller all the time dungeon when I'm not doing the big story mission dungeons.
Yeah.
So it's just like I have to take the pause on it because it's just like otherwise it's like looking into the sun and I'm just going to go crazy.
Yeah, because there's just, again, so much to do in it, which is why I put that on the back burner instead, put more emphasis into like Red Dead 2 for me, because even though Red Dead 2 is a huge game, to me it was easier to be in the environment. It made more sense. It was just easier overall to sink hours into without feeling like, oh crap, I'm not doing everything I have to do to make sure I'm progressing in this thing or that thing.
And for me, it was, to kind of counterpoint that, I would disagree on Red Dead, because I felt like with Red Dead 2, they broke what made that first Red Dead Redemption honestly great in my mind. It was just like there was a lot to do in Red Dead Redemption, but it didn't feel like you were always managing something. You were just doing stuff. With Red Dead Redemption 2, I felt more like a middle manager who was at the very frustrated with their job, because it's just, I have to manage this camp, and I have to manage the guy's weight, and I have to manage the guy's horse. And I know that probably all of that stuff is optional.
Yeah.
And Anthony, you can tell me if that's the case or not, because I didn't play too far into the game just because I felt I got so frustrated with how much I had to manage.
Yeah. I understand that, but here's my hot take for the day for everyone listening at home.
Hot take two.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is way better than first Red Dead Redemption, honestly, in many aspects. Minus a few key things, like combat can be tricky. For example, they moved the trigger button again, but I played the first Red Dead on Xbox and the second Red Dead on PlayStation 4, so maybe it was just different button layout, different controller. But one of the things is to actually hone in on a person to even talk to them. It's one button, and then the trigger button to actually fire is like right above it, or it's like right. Essentially, it's like L1 and R1 or L2 and then R2. And I would mix that up sometimes, end up killing somebody who I didn't mean to kill, which caused problems.
Or you're trying to talk to somebody and you draw your gun.
Yes, that would happen quite a bit. But honestly, there was a lot of those little managerial things that you can do. But again, a lot of that is optional. Like the whole weight thing that you mentioned, I didn't really find myself too bothered by that. It never came to a point where I was like, oh gosh, let me find a can of beans because I have to make sure I eat, or else if I don't eat, it's going to bring down my vitality and my strength, et cetera, et cetera. That portion of it didn't really matter to me, and I just love the in-game stuff they added, like gun customization, and tailor customization, where you're tailoring not only like hairstyle, beard style, you're also tailoring your clothes, and you can be like the gentleman cowboy if you want, or you can just be like the ragtag, everything's dirty, and I have a mutton chops kind of the cowboy.
Right. Which, yeah, just as valid. So I think that brings us to the end of our first topic, if I'm right, what we're playing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now we're moving on. We are moving on to what we are currently watching. So, Anthony, since you took the lead on the last round, I'll gladly take the lead on this one if you
awesome.
Are so inclined. My fiance and I have been jumping around a lot. Recently, and this is something that we got you into, Anthony. My Hero Academia just finished.
Yes, bitch.
Unfortunately, it just finished. But on the
bitch.
My Hero is of the type of anime where it is easily, of the genre where it would become popular. It's the shonen anime where it's just perpetual fighting and level ups and all that stuff. But honestly, I feel like My Hero is a little bit above the typical members of that genre because I feel like there is significant character progression for a lot of those student characters.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%.
And like I feel like it's rare to see that. I mean, I've never been like the most mainstream anime guy. Like, I would always go for more. I would lean more toward the bebop side of things. Cowboy bebop.
So folks listening at home, essentially, John and I really appreciate anime, but we're more like, we can't sit here and tell you what was the most popular anime of 1994 and how that changed the culture. Like, we're not going to sit here and try to pretend that we're these anime experts. So
yeah, no, and like I think like the most anime we watched was probably on whatever they had on Toonami or Adult Swim,
Yeah, essentially like your Cowboy Bebop, your, like for me, Case Closed that came on there, Dragon Ball Z, of course.
Yeah. Rurouni Kenshin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just like Wikipedia, Toonami's anime lineup, and that's probably between like the 90s and like the mid 2000s.
Yeah,
it's probably
essentially. Yeah, essentially.
But yeah, I think this season of My Hero was incredibly progressive for Midoriya, for all those the younger heroes, especially Bakugo, because like Bakugo has that he finally gets to some kind of point where he feels like he's not irrationally falling into his inferiority complex.
Yeah, so Bakugo is essentially the rival of the protagonist of the series, who's Midoriya, who John just briefly mentioned. Yeah. We're not going to sit here and try to explain every little aspect. If you know, you know. If you don't, go check out My Hero Academia.
It's worth the time.
It's definitely worth the time. John and his lovely fiance turned me onto the series, and luckily gave me an avenue in which to watch the series. And I shit you not, I think I binged all of it, because I think it's only like 4 or 5 seasons. Four seasons. It's only 4 seasons.
And a movie. Well, 2 movies.
Yeah. Well, the second movie hasn't officially dropped on streaming platforms as of yet, but
and fortunately for my fiance and I, we were able to watch it in theaters before theaters no longer exist.
Yeah, fair enough. My Corona. So essentially, it's worth your time. It's excellent. I binged it all. Like, I was watching at least a few episodes a day. And it was just real. Even if you're not into anime and you're like, anime, that Japanese bullshit. Like, no, it's really worth your time because the characters are great. The stories are great. The overall theme of everything is great. And it's just, it really hits a lot of things.
And for those that are curious who haven't heard of it, it is a superhero show in a society where superpowers are incredibly prevalent. And it is the story of how one of these people becomes the greatest hero of all time.
Yes, that's a great elevator synopsis.
Yeah. So that was one thing we were really, really just like hyped to make to watch first whenever a new episode dropped. The other Brooklyn Nine-Nine has been a big thing for my fiance and I. So I don't need to really go into specifics on Nine-Nine. It was saved from cancellation by Twitter, so I think that tells you everything.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's still incredibly funny, and I think that the move from Fox to NBC has really made them shine even more than they already were.
Yeah.
We watched The Legend of Korra over the last
okay, right on.
And
I've heard very mixed things of Legend of Korra.
I would call bullshit on their stuff. Honestly, like my memory of The Last Airbender is very fuzzy, and we're in the midst of rewatching it. But I would agree that Korra's not 100% perfect. That second season is what originally made me dump out of the show to begin with, because it felt so formulaic, because the villain was very predictable, and it's just I just wasn't engaged with the story of the season as a whole. But
right.
My fiance had watched through it and was just like, "Oh, you are missing some shit. Let me sit you down and learn you something." And I think that the progression of Korra as a character herself, for the first thing, is that it I think is a very good representation of somebody dealing with severe stress and PTSD, because there's moments as the show progresses where she gets rocked hard with the enormity of her position as the Avatar and the things that status puts upon her. And
for those of you unaware, essentially the Avatar is like the Messiah of this universe.
Yeah, and the universe is where it is a little bit, fantastical in that everybody can wield elements through martial arts styles. Earth, air, fire, water.
Heart.
And heart. Captain Planet!
Woo!
Captain Planet!
These are just jokes for John and I, folks. Sorry about that.
We're just doing what we do. This is what we do. Reference old ass YouTube videos that we have to bury from the recesses of the internet just to tease each other with. Don't make me start on Johnny Cash.
Oh God. Let's not. That's for a whole nother time. That's for the relationship building episode where we talk about all our backstory.
Yeah, we'll show it. We'll show them the light.
Oh, Jesus Christ! I hate you so much. I hate you.
But I'm oh so pretty.
Oh God.
But to bring it back to Korra, the second reason I think that the character is so fascinating and what's makes that show is that it's a very and you learn in that final episode, it's a very positive LGBT plus representation, and like so much so that I got my fiance the continuing comic books of the show, in part because I wanted to know what happened next.
Sure.
And Korra's relationship with some of the other characters and her now girlfriend, Asami, was just like, I just want those kids to have a good life. Like, I'm at this weird stage in my life where it's just like, I just want the characters to be happy. And like I'm doing that. I've done that with Korra, and in My Hero, I'm doing that a little bit with Midoriya and the female, essentially the female lead Uraraka, because it's just like those darn kids. When are they going to learn and just be happy? But yeah, like Korra, I would recommend anybody to use their quarantine to watch that.
Can we trademark that quarantine?
I wish I could. So I know I read it somewhere. I just don't know where. I mean, everything I learned is just some obscure shit that I read somewhere.
Fair enough.
The other thing is that we made our way through a lot of the animated Star Wars stuff.
Excellent.
And that's been the case throughout the year and in our quarantine. So we finished Clone Wars. The final season is still ongoing, of course, at least at the time of this recording. But Rebels and Clone Wars, honestly, are, I think, essential works in Star Wars. And like,
yes, to a point.
To a point. To a point. And this is a feeling I've started to get in a lot of the extended Star Wars media, in that some stuff feels like it's very unique and it's telling its own story, and then there are times where the whatever it is, be it a comic or a book, because I don't want to loop in the games, because honestly, Battlefront 2 is more of a multiplayer, even if it does have that story element to it.
Yeah, and the story on it's kind of weak. Yeah.
I know there was one Star Wars novel that I listened to on audiobook that mentioned some of the characters that show up in Battlefront 2, and it's just like, I mean, great for connections, but it just feels like you're connecting things for just because you can, not because you actively want to build. And I feel like that's I'm being a little too hypocritical, because part of adding a whole bunch of media like that is to build the world so that you can tell more stories in. But it's just like what they're building doesn't have great weight.
But they're not my stories, damn it!
Get out of here.
I feel the same way. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like I was reading one of the new Grand Admiral Thrawn novels.
Oh, hell yeah.
I mean, and I really liked the first two, because the first one is essentially his origin story, and the second one is Thrawn interacting with Vader, which is just like, okay, yeah, I mean, Vader,
which is an interesting as hell dynamic by itself. I mean,
exactly, but like this third novel was essentially just, this is the in-between time where Thrawn disappears from Rebels, and this book is the time where he leaves and when he comes back. That's it. So it's just like, I don't feel any stakes. I don't feel like, what I'm reading here is going to be important, because it never gets referenced. It's never going to be referenced in any kind of, show or movie.
Right. As of yet.
With Star Wars, it's always going to be subject to change, because we're never going to be without Star Wars at this point now. Now that
which look, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between at home, a lot of people have complained about that, but I'm at the point where you know what? Bring me more Star Wars. I'm okay with it. I literally will never say no to a Star Wars at this point. I love Star Wars to its core. I have loved it since I was a wee lad, and even more so now as an old lad, essentially. And I'm okay with that.
And it's not like all of the old things are being ripped away from people. I mean, they're part of Star Wars' appeal is that it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's a fairy tale. It's a fantasy story. And that makes sense why they call like the old expanded universe stuff legends, because it's just like, well, it could have happened.
Yeah.
And so it's just the rancor behind slamming the Disney era materials is just like honestly it ultimately doesn't matter, because they're not taking away anything from you. Those stories still exist if you so choose, or just enjoy them as what they are.
And this is when people are tuning off of our podcast.
Yeah. I'm
look at that. First podcast, we're already making our hot takes and defending our viewpoints of the Star Wars universe and the Star Wars mythos.
I mean, that's what we do, right? I mean, we just...
Yes. Star Wars, ladies and gentlemen, will be on a future podcast with a whole hour and a half to 2 hours, or however long we feel like talking for, just dedicated to nothing but such, and our hot takes and our viewpoints, which some of you may like, some of you may not like, and either way, we don't care.
We're just going to put this shit out anyway. That's just the long and the short of it.
And speaking of things that we actually care about, we're going to move on to what I've been watching, which John already mentioned, My Hero Academia. That was a little while ago. Before that, I binged all the Star Wars movies and TV shows in between, Mandalorian, Clone Wars, Rebels. If you have Disney Plus, since you have all this quarantine, definitely check it all out. I mean, you might as well. It's on there. It'll kill a lot of time, and it's very enjoyable. One of the other things outside of that I've been watching and getting back into has been The West Wing. For those of you who don't know, West Wing is a political intrigue TV show that was like in the 90s to 2000s era. Obviously it doesn't take place in real life, to whereas it's following, current day presidents or anything like that. But it's just a nice political intrigue of what the inside of the White House inner workings could look like. And it's a very well-written show. It's a very smart show. I really enjoy a lot of the themes behind it. And it's just kind of something nice to sink my teeth into amidst all this political and social turmoil that we're in now. It's just kind of a nice look to see. It's one thing to kind of, maybe rage against some of the things that's going on now, but it's another thing to try to understand what's going on and what could be going on within the inner workings of the political sphere, which I think West Wing, again, it's a fictional TV series, but a lot of the things I feel like were super true and rang true, and were that the creators of the show took into consideration what it actually looks like and what would it look like inside of the White House. It's definitely worth your time. It's definitely worth sitting there and watching. Even if you don't necessarily agree with some of the political topics they're talking about, it's still an interesting social piece to look at as a whole. Even if you don't agree with some of the individual parts, if that makes sense.
And I think the beauty of the West Wing is that it is able to explain how our system of government should work when you have incredibly competent people trying to solve problems.
Or even how it shouldn't work.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of episodes that just show how the bureaucracy of Congress to the Senate to the White House and what those dynamics look like, and kind of like the muck that could be there. So it kind of shows you the best of both worlds, what it could look like if things run smooth, some of the dirty dealings that have to take place. And again, this isn't just leaning towards one side or the other of the political sphere. This is just as a whole. Even if you're Republican, Democrat, or something in between, or nothing in between, it's just kind of a nice look into that sphere. And again, I'm not sitting here trying to spout my political views, nor is John, because you're going to believe what you believe up to this point. And
I will try, though.
Fair enough. And again, that's neither here nor there. But you're going to believe what you're going to believe, and that's fine, and I'm okay with that. As long as you're respectful, and you're not sitting here and trashing one side or the other, I'm okay with that. But West Wing is just a nice insight, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm on the second to last season right now, because I just picked up where I left off like years ago. That's the beauty is you can pretty much watch any episode and just jump right in. You don't necessarily have to watch from episode, season 1 to season 6. Although I recommend it, but you can just jump in at any point and kind of get a nice feel of the tempo, the pace, and the inner workings. Outside of that, me and my beautiful, lovely wife are still in the midst of our Columbo watch, because I own all the Columbo on DVD, so we're still kind of chipping away. We're up to like the 1980s, almost 1990s kind of episodes of Columbo.
You know what era that was? That was the, I believe that was the NBC mystery movie. And
I just tee them up to you. That's all. I just toss you these softballs, John, so you can knock them out of the park.
Well, you see, sir, that's what I do. I take a bat and I swing and I get those hits because that's what I do. I'm a champ.
John is just tickling me with his beautiful Peter Falk impressions right now.
I like most things in our life because we are like a symbiotic pop culture a resource to each other.
Pretty much.
I don't even remember how I fell into Columbo at this point.
I couldn't tell you. I
know I got you into it.
Yes, that I do remember.
I think I like something. It might have been like it just came across like my Twitter feed once upon a time. It's like detective show. What the hell is this? And then just the immense charm of Peter Falk is what makes that show.
Absolutely.
And it's like the later era is a little bit campy because it's just like he's playing more of a Peter Falk caricature as Columbo while still being Columbo.
That is accurate.
But like the early episodes in the 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, they are iconic. They are tremendous examples of the detective genre.
So essentially, for those of the uninitiated and unaware, Columbo was essentially a TV series that ran from like the 60s all the way, up to the 2000s, essentially.
2003. And it
2003.
It was an episodic TV movie, essentially. Every episode is about roughly an hour and a half. And it involves a murder. It always opens with a murder. And it's, who the murderer is, you understand their motives. So it's not the traditional Sherlock Holmesian, we have a crime, we don't know who did it. Now we have to find who done it. Columbo is a how do you catch him, and it's more about the chase of the perpetrator and Columbo, and how ultimately justice is served.
Yeah, and essentially he's an LAPD homicide investigator. So it takes place in California, Los Angeles, or just essentially all throughout the state of California, give or take.
And Mexico.
And Mexico, and even Great Britain. There's a couple episodes from there. But essentially, and the beauty of the show is that, Columbo isn't your stereotypical gumshoe where he's just hard-nosed and punching people in the face to get his answers, sticking people up with a gun. No, he plays kind of like a bumbling detective on the outside, but really he's just trying to off-put each one of the potential, to the potential murderer, and he's trying to get it out of them. And eventually, at the end of every episode, he outwits them to the point where they confess to the murder. And it's honestly beautifully how he does it. how he always gets a confession out of these people. And it is an older show, so a lot of the things may not necessarily hold up, but just the acting's great. Every episode is worth, maybe not every episode, but for the most part, a majority of those episodes are worth your time.
Yeah.
If you have a chance to just find these somewhere, YouTube, whatever.
I think that a majority of them right now might be on Amazon Prime.
If they are, guys and gals and everyone in between, just go watch them. I mean, watch a couple episodes. They're great. Again, if you have nothing else to watch and you're bored out of your mind, they star, like, Leonard Nimoy was in one of my favorite episodes. Just a lot of the who's of the not early, but of, like, the Hollywood of yore, essentially.
Yeah, it is very much old dead Hollywood at this point.
Yeah, a majority of these people are dead. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, probably 95% of these actors and actresses are passed away at this point.
I think the only person who comes to my mind that is still alive, at least guest star wise, is Shatner.
Yeah, that's fair.
And another thing about Columbo, which I always find fascinating, is that primarily the criminals are, upper crust socialite type people.
Yeah.
Which is, so it brings in an interesting little class thing where it's just like Columbo is very much blue collar, working man for doing public service as a police officer. So he's often going to be enjoying the luxuries, if you will, of, the hoity-toity assholes of our society.
Yeah, which is always a nice kind of stick it to the richer upper echelon kind of a thing.
What movies you watching lately, man?
Oh, movies. So right now so I love my wife dearly, but she's never really watched, or she's only watched bits and parts of the Back to the Future trilogy. So we kind of I took it upon ourselves to we watched the first Back to the Future just a few days ago, actually. And
perfect movie.
Great movie.
Perfect movie. That's one of the perfect movies, I think.
I think I ruined it for my wife because for the most part I was quoting a lot of the scenes because I've seen these movies, a million times at this point. And so, like, especially on my favorite scenes, like when George McFly, Marty's dad, walks into the cafe to try to woo his beau at that point, or potentially.
I know what you're going to say.
And he walks up to the counter, and he's out of sorts, he's out of his mind, but he's trying to build up confidence. And stereotypically at that point, people will get a drink for liquid courage, and they'll just down it, like, yeah, now I have some alcohol in me, so I can do this. But he walks straight up to the counter. You don't see the guy behind the counter at all. You just see the camera's just panned right on George McFly. He slams his hand on the counter and says, "Milk, chocolate," and just sticks his hand out, and a chocolate milkshake, or chocolate milk, just slides down the counter out of frame into his hand, and he picks it up, like, swigs it down like it's a shot of tequila, throws the glass down on the counter, and then goes and starts talking to the potential love interest. And I was quoting the entire scene all the way up to "You're my density." And it still holds up really, really well. It holds up, especially if you have some knowledge of 80s pop culture, because some of the jokes can kind of fall flat, but if you know some certain things, for example, Marty's interaction when he first gets back to the 1950s is he asks for a tab and a Pepsi free. So a tab was a soda back in the 1980s, which was a sugar-free soda. So when he's asking for a tab, the cafe owner thinks of it as like a tab, like you run at a bar before paying. You buy X amount of drinks before having to pay your bill. He asked for, a Pepsi free, which, again, Pepsi free in the 1980s was a sugar-free kind of a soda made by Pepsi Cola. So if you understand little intricacies like that, it makes the movie that much better. But even if you didn't know those stupid little facts that I know, because my head is full of useless knowledge, it's still just a great movie, back to front to back. Well acted. Soundtrack was great.
Alan Silvestri, Avengers now.
Yeah.
So that should tell you the quality of music to expect. Silvestri is one of the legends in the film score industry. So,
oh, for sure. Outside of the Back to the Future movies, haven't really watched, at least nothing that's coming to mind right now. I've kind of had one-offs on Netflix watching movies here and there that's there.
yeah.
But outside of that, those are the most pressing ones. John, what movies have you been up to and have you been watching?
Well, we've done a couple. We watched Onward on Disney Plus, which is one of those quarantine non-theater release movies that was going to be released in theaters until the pandemic shut everything down. My fiance had been really looking forward to seeing Onward in the theaters, but we kind of just lost the opportunity. In part because we were busy, and the shelter-in-place order started rolling around the time of the movie's initial release.
Right.
We watched A Fish Called Wanda.
Ooh, excellent. How does that hold up?
It's still it's still really funny. Still really funny.
Okay.
John Cleese, honestly, is a master in that movie, and so is Kevin Kline. He is a whirlwind in that movie.
Excellent.
Yeah, and Jamie Lee Curtis holds her own, even though I think for the most part they kind of use her as eye candy. But I mean, it's Jamie Lee Curtis. She has her own comedic chops.
Yeah,
and you can hold her own with the most aggressive of comedic actors, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. For sure.
The one big one that I'd like to talk to people about is Hunt for the Wilder People, which is a Taika Waititi movie of Thor Ragnarok fame. He wrote and directed Hunt for the Wilder People. It was the movie that he did prior to getting the Marvel Studios gig. It's about a young New Zealand boy who's who likes his rap music and is a bit hefty and has been tossed around the foster care system a lot, finding a home. And Sam Neill is in it, and it's shot in New Zealand. It's beautiful. Seeing the New Zealand landscape. It's they're in the bush for a lot of the movie because the place this young boy, I think his name is. I don't remember what his name is. I think it was Julian Dennison or something. I just feel bad because I want to give the kid his credit.
Fair enough.
Let me see.
So as John is looking this up, I'm going to sit here and filibuster for a while and just tell the studio audience that I have no idea what movie John's talking about.
His name is Julian Dennison. You'll recognize him as the kid in Deadpool 2 that Cable is trying to murder.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This Hunt for the Wilder People was his big break, and if anybody wants to watch it, it's a very fun, heartwarming comedy drama available on Hulu.
Hulu.
You do.
Jesus Christ.
You wouldn't have me any other way, buddy.
Oh, fair enough.
So, what are you looking forward to?
Dune! All right, that was awesome. You went into your backdrop. So for those of you, if for some reason we don't post the video of this, it's just audio. John has a background of Doctor Strange's nice little hospice there. The same, I can't pronounce it.
It's not a hospice.
Okay, well, it's about his study,
the Sanctum Sanctorum.
Yeah, what John said.
It's the giant window. It's the benefit of using Zoom. We get to have these virtual backgrounds that have made their way across memes in the internet.
Well, the funny part is John just, as soon as he yelled Dune, he wanted to get away from the microphone, and he disappeared into the background, which is some Doctor Strange bullshit, like he went into the multiverse.
But yeah, Dune. We got a lot of footage on Denis Villeneuve's first part of a two-part adaptation of the novel Dune by Frank Herbert. And
which I love and John loves, and
yes,
which we both have an agreement that the 1980s film was interesting. Yes, we'll stick with interesting.
I mean, David Lynch for me is like
Lynch.
Hello, my name is David Lynch, and I would like to talk about Dune.
For those listening at home, that's essentially what David Lynch sounds like, or our caricature of what David Lynch, who was the director of Dune and a lot of like 90s weird TV show / movies.
Twin Peaks fame, of Blue Velvet fame. Twin Peaks.
God, you got some fucking deep cuts there. I would have pulled Twin Peaks and rolled along with it.
I'm just going with the things that I remember off the top of my head. Mulholland Drive, that's the big one. That's the other big one. What was it? 1984.
Sure.
Early 1980. His adaptation of Dune is interesting. You know, he's vocally said he wasn't the biggest fan of the novel, so he takes a little bit of liberties for the most part, and you know, it's very dated at this point. I mean, there's a lot of practical effects and bad, you know, computer effects, you know, for the time. But I think as a whole, it's probably, you know, you're better off reading the novel.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and even though the novel is, you know, something that was written in the 60s and is, you know, dated in some some aspects, particularly how the women kind of are portrayed.
Yes, and 100% agreement with that. But even if, and not to make light of that issue by itself, but even if you can just look at the book as a whole, it's got a lot of great themes in it. It's got a lot of great, again, even if you want to look at it as a political intrigue book, if you want to look into it as just a pure sci-fi fantasy aspect of it, there's a lot of different ways you can look into it, but it's just all tied into just a great series. I remember reading it a few years back and just, like, I couldn't put the book down, like literally staying up to like 4 or 5 in the morning just reading this book. It was very excellent.
Yeah, that's the wonder of Dune. Yeah, and it's also the drawback of Dune is that if you're not reading closely, you can get a little bit overwhelmed and it gets convoluted and complicated. That was my first experience with the novel. The first time I read it, I did not really understand what happened, and I wasn't that big of a fan. And then I read it again, and that's when it unlocked itself for me, and I was able to really appreciate the grandeur of what, you know, that world is, and what the messages that were being discussed there. You know, it's covering, you know, the complicated nature of politics and the corruption of power, and you know, how people are subjugated just because, you know, the rich and wealthy want something and will abuse anybody and everything to get what they want. And the other thing is that what I'm hoping the movie does is, you know, and all intents and purposes, it sounds like Denis' approach is to modernize it to today's sensibilities. So there'll be more roles for the female characters. There'll be, you know, I already know that one character has been gender flipped.
Interesting.
So it's just, you know, I'm very excited for this adaptation. Oscar Isaac is, I think, the one thing outside of Timothée Chalamet who is lighting the internet's pants on fire. Because I mean, you know, both of those men have a very avid internet following, if you will.
Yes. That's putting it mildly.
Yeah. So I mean, it's got a hell of a cast, though.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I am So some of the stills recently, within the last couple of days, were released. I mean, they look great. I know there's some controversy behind the film in itself. One of the ones is that there's not enough of characters of color in it, which is a very fair criticism.
Yeah, I would say 50-50 on that, because I think, like Jason Momoa is in the movie, and he is, of Pacific Islander, Polynesian descent, if I recall. I will happily correct myself if I'm wrong, because I probably am.
This is coming from two extremely white dudes, so we understand our position. We understand our privilege. We understand our position, and we acknowledge that. And we're not trying to come at you and beat, punch down on anybody. But essentially, we're just trying to state the facts, right? That's just one of the fair criticisms on Twitter, on all social media pages that were coming out. We don't have an easy solve for it, obviously. It's not up to us, but essentially at the end of the day, we're still going to go watch it because we love the book. We love how what it does, and we're as far as a movie adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that second part is guaranteed, because I'm a little afraid that they split it in two.
Yeah. I'm hoping they're not pulling a. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh boy, we're having technical difficulties up the wazoo.
Ooh, so this is going to be edited.
Here's hoping. So, edit point. So Dune, right?
Okay, we'll do it live.
Go live. Anthony is exactly on point. We're just trying to state the facts and give criticism where criticism is due, but also acknowledge that advances have been made. It's not a whole bunch of white guys,
Fair.
hanging around in the sand. Even though there is a good chunk of white guys, but the cast is, I would say, it's still fairly diverse. It would need more, I think, actors, Middle Eastern actors, since from what I understand, Dune is, I think.
Hello.
Oh boy.
Ah, shoot.
Okay, we're back.
God.
Ah.
All right. So what we're trying to say at the end of the day is go see Dune. Just go fucking see Dune. Go do it. Bite the bullet. Read the book. Go see the movie.
Yeah, it highly recommended. Fuck. That's
so what? Oh god, this edit's gonna suck. So video games I'm looking forward to. I was looking forward to the Final Fantasy VII remake because I've never really played it. But I played the demo, and one of the things John and I agreed upon was that we're going to wait till it drops in price till maybe like $30 to $20, because I don't really feel like paying $60 for one installment when it's going to be a multiple disc. Well, its initial release was a multiple disc, and this remake essentially only covers like disc one.
And I'm of the mindset where it's just like, give me the whole freaking game, man.
Yeah.
Either release it all at once or just put it off until it's ready.
But with that even being said, it's one of the most beautiful games I've seen in a very long time. It is a gorgeous game, just even on the PS4 alone. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm looking to Cyberpunk. I'm looking forward to Left 4 Dead. Not Left 4 Dead. Jesus, what is it? The zombie thriller game that I'm looking forward to. That is not Left 4 Dead, because that is the party game that kills zombies, but it is the game which featured two protagonists in the first installment, and for some fucking reason I can't think of the name.
And I can't, it's not ringing any bells for me, so I can't help you.
John Filibuster.
I could talk about the stuff that I'm looking forward to.
There you go.
I mean, like movie-wise, hopefully Dune does come out, and theaters are open for people to see it. Also really looking forward to No Time to Die, the new Bond movie. That looks fantastic, and it's going to be nice to see Daniel Craig get his swan song, which is a rare thing to happen for Bond actors. They never get to say goodbye. They always kind of just disappear into the sunset with nary a word. The other movie I'm looking forward to is Christopher Nolan's Tenet. That looks phenomenal. My fiance and I saw Dunkirk in IMAX film, and it was a hell of a movie to see.
It really was. It was a good movie. I will give it that.
Especially in that format.
Last of Us Part 2, John. Last of Us Part 2. Jesus
Christ! They don't even have zombies in that game.
They're kind of zombies.
They're like spore shit.
Jesus Christ! Last of Us Part 2, folks, which got delayed along with Cyberpunk 2077
for unknown reasons.
Essentially coronavirus with shipping and all of that.
That's the vibe I got from it, but they were also mentioning that it was just like some kind of technical thing that they were working out, which I mean, I don't know. It's probably both.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to end up seeing what happens with like, the other big games of this year. Like, at least for me, like Last of Us is on that list as well. For me.
Yeah.
Because that's one that I cry like a baby.
I think everybody cried at the opening of that first installment of Last of Us,
and it's just that game is a testament to what games can do, and it honestly I think is one of the defining games of the last like 2 console generations. I think.
Yeah, no, 100% agree.
Tie a lot of lines to that game to and how it's influenced. The Ghost of Tsushima.
Yes.
Me.
Yep. Ghost of Tsushima. Shoot. Wow. Let's try that again. Ghost of Tsushima as well. I'm always down for a good samurai game that actually takes itself serious and not like a weird offshoot of like Dark Souls clone, essentially.
And I appreciate the grandeur that they're giving Ghost of Tsushima, because it's just you get to decide how you want to do this. We're not going to tell you where to go. You have to figure that out. We're not going to tell you we'll tell you how to play, but how you choose to do it is up to you.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for the freedom of that, and to have a very big expansive world and an expansive story to just dive into.
Honestly, I'm probably, because I think me and John have talked about this off air, and essentially we're both probably going to be Sony fanboys from this point on. Myself, I for this current console, I own all the big 3, the Switch, the Xbox One, and the PS4, but I think going forward, I'm just going to stick to Sony. I love their exclusives better. I like their setup better overall.
And like in my experience with this last console generation, I was a 360 guy before the PS4 dropped.
Yeah.
And, in the PS3 at 360 era, I think both games had a pretty even amount of exclusives, and there were games that for all the consoles that were very enjoyable. But for this next generation, I think Xbox and Microsoft really just shot themselves in the foot with a lot of the really early dialogue about the Xbox One, and
about
like you remember all the stuff about sharing games and all that shit, where it was just
right.
And then Sony just beautifully just one ups them, and. Yeah, but like Sony's exclusives. I mean, they came out the gate. Did they come out the gate with Uncharted 4?
I mean, if not, it was like slowly after launch. Like the first Last of Us came out like the last dying breath of the PS3.
Yeah, and then it got
to where it was like a PS4 essential launch. Like, because the PS4 I bought came with Last of Us Part 1. And then again, it just came out hit after hit with exclusives, with Horizon Zero Dawn to Spider-Man to God of War to the Uncharted 4 and the Uncharted series as a whole when they did the remastered remake
and Legacy.
And Legacy.
Lost Legacy. That's
Lost Legacy, right.
That's the 5th game.
And again, probably with 1,000 more that I haven't even remembered at this point. But again, it's just a lot more single-player, narrative-focused gaming, which, again, I'm not much of an online player. I haven't found a great community to play in that's not, that has the same kind of a mind that John and I share. I don't have to say it's not out there per se, but I like my single-player game. It goes back to my love for BioWare games, from the Mass Effect trilogy to Knights of the Old Republic to all those other ones. I just enjoy a story where I can take my time with it and not have to rely on other people to help me through a story or help me through whatever it may be.
And the other game I'm looking forward to is that Avengers game.
That one's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
That one I'm going to keep my eye on and just kind of see how that progresses and see once it launches how it actually holds itself and how it holds up.
I mean, I was like a lot of folks, not too aggressive about it because I think, when that game first initially debuted, a lot of people were very vocal about their disappointment in the Avengers of that game not looking like the film Avengers, which, I won't get too into, but it's completely unrealistic for a number of reasons, all of which are financial. No one could ever afford.
At that point, you're going to have to pay all these actors for their likeness, and that's just so cost efficient.
Yeah, so it's better to just design on your own. But that I would agree that the initial reveal wasn't too inspiring, but I gave it a little bit of pause because I think that by that point, the PlayStation Spider-Man had come out and had received a lot of goodwill. So it was just like, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. It may be a different studio, but Marvel is still with their hands in the pot, so they don't want to release a shit project.
Right. So, yeah.
Let's wait to see until we get more footage. And then my fiance and I went to San Diego Comic-Con of last year, and we were able to experience the Marvel Games panel, and they showed exclusive footage of the Avengers game that they weren't going to show the greater public until probably, I think, 3 months later. So from July, they were going to show it at Gamescom, I think in Germany. And that's where they revealed the gameplay, but we had saw it first. And it was a full 20-minute demo of essentially what is the prologue of the game, the inciting incident that sets up the world for where you will be playing the majority of your time in. And to see the Avengers very, fully formed, very much like that Spider-Man game was, where you are inhabiting Spider-Man. You are able to be Spider-Man 100%. It was the same experience seeing that footage. It's just like, okay, you could build a Thor game entirely about what they give Thor in that game. You can build a Black Widow game just around the Black Widow parts, and so on and so forth. So that game-wise, that's what I'm really looking forward to. TV-wise, I think I speak for both of us in that the Marvel Studios TV shows are going to be something to watch.
100%. Whether it's the new season of Mandalorian coming out, any other sort of exclusives that they're going to come out with from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or Star Wars spinoffs or anything. I think Disney Plus is just going to – I mean, they already came out of the gate strong. They're already picking up steam.
And the second season of Mandalorian is already filmed and being edited, so I don't think we'll see any delay on that side at least.
Right. So and again, I kind of share that same theme. As far as any other TV shows, like I said, I'm just kind of lukewarm on that at best anyway, besides just what's on streaming, either Netflix exclusive stuff or Disney Plus exclusive stuff.
I mean, TV habits have, at least for me, and I think it's very much the same for you. When we were younger, it was easier to kind of get into shows because they were always putting out something in the fall or in the spring or in the summer. Yeah. Now it's just like, there's just so much content.
Yeah.
It's just like it's hard to you pick up on things just because it's a TV adaptation of a movie or something, or it's a comic book adaptation or a book adaptation or this something along those lines. and you just hear about it just by, what you see in a trailer, and it's just like, oh,
Sure.
the trailer caught my attention. Let's give it a try. And then,
or social media, or both, or whatever have you.
I mean, it's hard to say outside of like those really, really big things. At least for me.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
Book wise, for me, since I'm a very avid reader, there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline. So hopefully, distribution isn't too bad because, in our quarantine time, we have Corona to worry about, and Corona likes to ruin everything.
Pretty much.
I mean, primarily, like the comic wise, I'm looking forward to seeing the collection of a DC young adult book called Superman Smashes the Klan, which is a Superman story where it is period based, set in like the late 30s, early 40s, where Superman fights racism and smashes
which is amazing in itself. But also, John turned me onto a book that essentially is the same. It's almost the same premise, where it's Superman versus the Klan, and it's just kind of a documentary of Superman, it's of himself, and how the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. So that sounds interesting as hell, just based off of the audiobook I listened to that you gave me, John.
Yeah,
it's even in the same realm.
Yeah, that book that you're referring to, Anthony, is a book called Superman versus the Ku Klux Klan, the true story of how the iconic superhero battled the men of hate. It is by a gentleman named Rick Bowers. Yeah. I would highly recommend either the audiobook or the actual book, because it details the story of how the Superman radio play was used as a journalistic endeavor to reveal the true nature of the Ku Klux Klan to the public at large, because at the time the Klan was somewhat praised as being a very positive movement, but the racial violence that they are now known for was very much buried and hidden under fear and threat of violence. And the radio show was one of the things that helped bring a lot of that to light. And this comic is written by a gentleman named Gene Yuen Lang, or Yang. I'm sorry, Gene Yuen Lang, who you would know, Anthony, as
I was gonna say
what is it called, the Dragon Hero?
Yeah, I think it was Dragon Hero, which was a comic, like a novel, graphic novel offshoot I read many moons ago.
Yeah. So hopefully, I might need to correct the title, but that'll be another day.
That'll be for another time. We'll fix it in post.
We'll do it live in post. But Superman Smashes the Klan is a big one for me. Jim Butcher's Dresden Files comes back this year.
Oh, yeah.
And he's doing 2 books, which is a nice surprise. So we get books 16 and 17. A short little info dump on the Dresden Files. It is a supernatural urban fantasy series about a wizard private eye who gets up to all kinds of shenanigans. The audiobooks are excellent. The books themselves are excellent. There's about 15 novels and about 2 short story collections.
Yeah.
Highly recommended.
Highly. Just read the damn books, or listen to the audiobooks if you just hate reading words on paper, because the audiobooks, most of them, or 99% of them, are done by the gentleman whose name escapes me, but who played Spike on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, amongst other roles. James Dresden?
James Marsters. James Marster or some. Spike from Buffy. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
If you're a Buffy.
Well acted, well done.
Yes.
I listened to them. I blew through them and then went through almost all of them a second go around some years back. Just very well done. Still hold up. Let me see. As far as other games that we hope to come out, put Mass Effect Trilogy on Switch, you cowards, or give us a remastered. I'll even settle for a Dragon Age remastered on Switch or a port on Switch, you cowards. Those are the 2 that just come to mind. Oh yeah, and give me, since Jedi Fallen Order had some commercial success, give me a new Knights of the Old Republic, you fucking cowards.
Which we think is happening.
Which we think is happening, but essentially they came out with some kind of murmurs about them. Yes, we do know that there's a MMORPG of Old Republic. MMORPGs are just not for us. They suck. They just take too much time. Not to say that this one sucked. I dabbled in a little bit. Just, it's too much time. Give me a good 50 to 80 hour single player RPG. Thank you.
I mean, I'll take the level of customization an MMORPG has, but
yes,
I just I just don't have the personal patience for it. That's just me.
For sure. Well, that's just us, John.
Yeah, that is true.
So with that being said, I know you all have been patiently sitting here listening to us babble on about a plethora of subjects. We want to say we hope from the bottom of our hearts that you all are being safe, doing well, trying to keep your spirits up, trying to keep your sanity up. Just remember, always reach out to somebody if you feel like you're too isolated in this climate, in this particular climate. We're going to try to make this a more regular thing. I don't know how we're going to post this, where we're going to post this, but if you're listening to it now, we figured it out. So thank you.
Might take us a little bit of time in between, but I don't know about you. I'm thinking we do this, bi-weekly, every 2 weeks?
Hopefully. That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's definitely the goal. We're going to have to see how far as turnaround when editing goes and all that other stuff. Or maybe we'll just say forget about it and just put it straight up live with all of our warts and all showing. But for John, thank you for spending this time with me, as always.
As always.
You have forever been and forever will be my friend. And that being said, I'm trying to think of a catchy, snappy send-off for our inaugural Ludic Lounge.
If I may do the honor.
Should.
On behalf of Anthony and myself, we thank you for joining us in the Ludic Lounge. We hope you've enjoyed yourself. We will see you next time when you come to lounge with us.
Keep your face in the pillow and your ass in the air.
That's how you want to end it? That's how you want to end it?
That's how I'm going to end it.
Well...